They found him 40 feet from his own door. 40 feet. Close enough that on a clear day he could have thrown a stone from where they found him and hit the cabin wall. His snowshoes were still strapped to his boots. His hatchet was still hanging off his belt. There was dry wood stacked inside that cabin, a stove that would light with one match, and a lantern half full of oil sitting on the table waiting for him. And he died out there in the open with the door 40 feet away, curled up against the base of a spruce, like a man who'd simply decided to stop. I've been turning that over in my head for the better part of 30 winters now, because I knew the country he died in, and I knew the kind of man he was, and none of it added up the way a death is supposed to add up. He wasn't lost. A man 40 feet from his cabin is not lost. He wasn't out of firewood. He wasn't caught by a storm that came from nowhere, because the weather that week was cold but plain. No blizzard, no whiteout. Nothing a seasoned trapper couldn't walk through. And that's the part that ought to stop you cold, the same way it stopped every trapper who ever heard the story told right. Here's the thing that sounds backward, so stay with me, because it's true on the second hearing, even though it sounds like a lie on the first. The warm-looking thing, the thing that feels like rescue, the thing your own body will beg you for out in the deep cold, has killed more men in this country than the freezing wind ever did. More than the bears. More than the falls through thin ice. More than the storms. And the cruel part, the part that makes trappers go quiet when you bring it up, is that the men it kills almost always die feeling better than they'd felt in hours. They die comfortable. They die warm. They lie down in the snow, feeling like the worst of it is finally past. And it has. Only not the way they think. I'm going to tell you how a freezing man dies of feeling warm. But not yet. Hold that in the back of your mind, because it's the whole spine of this story, and if you forget it, none of the rest will land the way it should. How a freezing man dies of feeling warm. Keep it with you. Let me tell you who I am first, so you understand I'm not reading this out of some book somebody wrote in a heated office. I've run a trap line in country where the nearest other soul was 2 days' walk and a frozen river away. I've been cold in the way that changes a man, the kind of cold that gets into your judgment and starts making decisions for you before you even know a decision's being made. And the men who taught me what I'm about to tell you didn't learn it from lectures either. They learned it the way all the real knowing gets learned out here, which is by burying somebody over it. Every one of these old rules has a name attached to it somewhere back down the line. A man who didn't know the rule and paid for the rest of us to know it. The first thing they hammered into me, and it's the thing most people have flat backward, is this notion that the danger in the cold is the cold you can feel. Folks think freezing to death means suffering, means shivering harder and harder until the end, means fighting the whole way down. Picture it in your head, and that's what you see. A man clutching himself, teeth chattering, growing weaker but aware, fighting to the last. And that picture is a lie. That picture has probably killed people all on its own, because it teaches you to fear the wrong moment. The shivering man isn't the one in the gravest danger. The shivering man's body is still fighting, still burning fuel, still throwing everything it has at the problem. Shivering is your body working. It's when the shivering stops that the old hands got scared. Hold tight to this next part because it's where the whole thing turns. The men who died this way, a great many of them, died in the part of freezing that feels like getting better. They died in the part where the cold stopped hurting. And that trapper they found 40 feet from his cabin, I'd bet everything I own that in his final minutes he wasn't suffering at all. I'd bet he felt warm. I'd bet he felt calm. I'd bet the spruce he curled up under felt as good to him as a feather bed, and that lying down in the snow felt like the most reasonable, sensible, comfortable thing a man could do. That's not me guessing. That's the pattern. The same pattern, told and retold across 100 years of these deaths. And it's so consistent it has a name. But before that name makes any sense, you have to understand why the warm feeling is the dangerous feeling. And it comes down to the body and the cold working against each other in a way nobody warns you about. When you first get cold, your body does the smart thing. It pulls the blood in from your hands and your feet and your skin and hoards it deep around your heart and your lungs and your brain, protecting the core, protecting the parts that keep you alive. That's why your fingers go white and numb first, and your face and your ears. Your body is spending the outside to save the inside. That's it fighting for you. And here's the trap, set and waiting. That same pulling in is what makes your skin go numb, and numb skin doesn't feel cold anymore. So the very thing keeping you alive is also switching off the alarm that would tell you how much trouble you're in. Now here's where most folks go wrong, so lean in close, because if this piece doesn't land, nothing else I say will keep you alive. Most people carry the belief, deep down, that they'll know when they're in real danger, that their own body will tell them, that fear will show up on time and make them turn back towards safety. It's the most natural belief in the world, and out here in the cold, it is dead wrong. Because the deeper the cold gets into you, the more it goes after the one organ you're trusting to save you, which is your own mind. Cold makes you stupid before it makes you dead. It takes your judgment first. It doesn't wait until the end to fog your thinking. It fogs your thinking early, while you've still got the strength to make every wrong move at full speed. Sit with that, because it tells you who really understood this country and who only thought they did. The native peoples who lived 1,000 winters on this land, and the old trappers who lived to be old trappers, they didn't trust their own feeling of warmth or their own feeling of being fine. They built their whole way of moving through winter around the knowledge that the cold lies to you. They made their decisions early, while their heads were still clear, and they wrote those decisions in habit and in rule, so that when the cold came for their judgment, there was a rule already standing in place of the judgment it had stolen. The ones who died were the ones who figured they'd rely on how they felt in the moment, who copied all the surface of woodcraft, the traps and the snowshoes and the fires, and skipped the one piece of knowing that mattered most, which is that in deep cold, your own mind is the thing most likely to kill you. So here's the fix, and I'll hand it to you in layers the way it was handed to me, because dumping it all at once robs it of its weight. And I'll tell you now, up front, so you don't spend this whole story waiting for me to sell you something. The fix costs nothing. It is free as the snow on the ground. In fact, the most important part of it is a thing people throw away, a thing they scrape off and discard without a thought. And I'll get to exactly what that is. But first, the layers. The first layer flips your whole head around. You do not trust how warm you feel. You trust the clock and the rule, not the feeling. Out in hard cold, the moment you notice you've stopped feeling cold, the moment the discomfort eases and a kind of comfort settles over you, that is not the danger passing. That is the danger arriving. Feeling better is the warning sign. Feeling warm when you know good and well it's 20 below is the body's last lie before the lights go out. The old hands treated a sudden feeling of warmth in bitter cold the way you'd treat the smell of smoke in a sleeping house. Not as relief, as alarm. The second layer is the one modern people discard, and I mean that both ways, because it's a piece of knowing they've thrown out, and it's also literally a thing they throw away. When the cold gets into you and the shivering starts, the shivering is your friend, and you feed it. You do not fight the shivering. You do not grit your teeth and hold still and try to look tough. Shivering is your body burning fuel to make heat, and it will keep you alive a long while if you keep feeding it, which means you keep moving, you keep your muscles working, and above all, you get fuel and warmth into you before the shivering stops on its own. Because when it stops on its own, that's the furnace going out, not the house warming up. But here's the part people discard. The thing that feeds that inner fire best in a pinch is fat, grease, the rich stuff. And it's the very thing folks scrape off and toss. The old trappers kept fat on them the way a man today keeps matches. A lump of pemmican, a slab of grease, tallow, the rendered fat off the fall kill. Not lean jerky, fat. Because when the cold is eating your fire from the inside, the fastest thing you can pour on that fire is grease, and it's the one thing everybody nowadays trims off and throws in the dirt. The third layer feels like cheating once you learn it, because it costs nothing, and it undoes half the danger before it starts. You get out of the wind, always, before you do anything else, even before you build the big fire, even before anything. Wind is the thief. A man can survive a shocking depth of still cold, but wind reaches in and strips the warmth off you faster than you can make it, and it does it silently. And the trapper who understood this would burrow into snow, dig in behind a deadfall, wedge himself into the lee of a boulder, cut branches and pile them, do anything to break the wind before he did anything else. It feels like cheating because it's so simple and it works so well. Snow itself, packed around you, will hold your heat like a blanket. The very thing that's killing you, if you shape it right, becomes the thing that saves you. Get out of the wind first. Everything else is second. And the fourth layer is the one that sounds like madness until it clicks, the way the true ones always do. When you're deep in the cold and your body is desperate, the thing every instinct in you screams to do is push hard, move fast, work up a sweat, drive towards safety with everything you've got. And that is the thing that can finish you, because sweat in the cold is death. Sweat soaks your clothes from the inside, and wet clothing stops holding your heat. And the moment you stop pushing, all that sweat turns to ice against your skin and steals your warmth faster than the bare wind ever could. So the madness is this. When the cold is at its worst, you do less, not more. You move steady and slow, and you never let yourself sweat. The starving man wants to eat more lean meat, and it kills him. And the freezing man wants to work harder and faster, and it kills him just the same. In the worst of it, you slow down. You keep the fire lit low and even, inside and out, and you never once let it flare up into sweat, because the flare is what finishes you. Now circle back to that riddle I told you to hold. How a freezing man dies of feeling warm. Because here's the answer laid out plain, and once you see it, the whole thing locks into place, and you'll understand what happened to that man 40 feet from his door. It's got a name. It's called paradoxical undressing, and it is one of the strangest and most haunting things in the whole book of cold death. And it's real, and it's documented, and the men who find these bodies have seen it more times than they'd care to. In the last stages of freezing, after the shivering is stopped, after the cold has stripped away the judgment, the blood vessels that had clamped down tight to hoard the warmth deep in the core, they suddenly give up and swing wide open. All at once, that hoarded warmth rushes out to the skin. And to the dying man, in that moment, it feels like a wave of heat. It feels like he's burning up. It feels like he's too hot. So he does the thing that seems, to his fogged and failing mind, perfectly reasonable. He starts taking off his clothes. Men have been found in the deep snow half undressed, coat thrown aside, shirt open, having peeled off the very layers keeping them alive, because in their final minutes the cold had lied to them so completely that freezing felt like burning. And there's a last stage worse than that one. It's called terminal burrowing. At the very end, some part of the dying brain, some old animal part, tries to hide, tries to den up like a bear. And the man crawls into a small, tight space, under a bed, behind a stove, into a corner, under a spruce 40 feet from his own front door, and curls up small and stops. They find them tucked away in the strangest places, places that made no sense to the men who found them, until you understand it's the oldest instinct there is. The instinct to den, firing one last time in a brain the cold has almost finished with. So now you know. That trapper wasn't lost, and he wasn't caught by a storm, and he wasn't out of wood. He got cold, and the cold took his judgment before it took anything else. And somewhere in there his body played its last cruel trick, that flood of false warmth. And he felt fine. He felt better than fine. He maybe even felt too warm, and his failing mind told him to lie down and den up and rest. And the door was 40 feet away and might as well have been 40 miles, because the one tool he needed most, his own clear thinking, had already frozen solid hours before his body did. That's how a freezing man dies of feeling warm. He dies believing he's been saved. I told you this was documented, and I won't leave that hanging, because it's the part that proves I'm not spinning you a campfire tale. This isn't old-timer superstition. The people who study death from cold, the medical examiners, the search and rescue outfits, they've cataloged paradoxical undressing and terminal burrowing across decade after decade of recovered bodies, in the mountains, in the far north, everywhere the cold kills. Robert Scott's men dying in the Antarctic left records of this creeping failure of the mind and the false ease that comes near the end. And any winter mountaineer who's had the training will tell you the same rule the old trappers lived by, that the moment a cold man says he feels warm and wants to lie down and sleep, that is the emergency. That is the red alarm, and you do not let him. When the freezing man tells you he feels fine, that's exactly when you know he isn't. You're probably wondering by now why nobody ever told you this plain, why it isn't common knowledge, and the answer is quiet and true and has nothing to do with any conspiracy. It's that the knowing only stays alive as long as people need it. The old trappers needed it every single winter of their lives, so it stayed sharp in them, passed hand to hand, father to son, one buried friend to the next. But the day the furnace came, and the thermostat, and the heated truck, and the phone in your pocket that calls for help, the need faded, and the knowing faded right behind it, because nobody keeps a rule sharp that they never think they'll use. And here's the part that ought to make you sit up. The modern world didn't just forget this rule. It took the truth and sold you the opposite. It sold you the idea that comfort is safety, that the warm feeling is the good feeling, always, that when your body feels good, you're fine, and when it feels bad, you're in trouble. A straight, simple line. Feel good equals safe. And out in the cold, that line is not just wrong, it's exactly backward. Because the cold's final gift, its last and cruelest kindness, is to make you feel good right as it's killing you. A whole world raised to chase the warm, comfortable feeling and trust it completely, turned loose in the one place where trusting that feeling will put you in the ground. They didn't hide the truth from you. They just sold you something that feels better. And the truth got crowded out because there was never a dollar in it. Let me be straight with you now, the way I'd want a man to be straight with me, because I'd rather you trust me than be impressed. I'm not going to tell you this is coming for you. Most of you will never freeze to death, not with a furnace humming and a road out front and a town down the way. To actually die of this, you'd have to be out in real cold, wet or exhausted or both, far enough from warmth that the cold has time to work through all its stages on you. But I'll tell you what every man it ever took had in common. Every one of them, right up until the cold took his judgment, was certain he was fine. That trapper thought he was fine. The undressed men in the snow thought they were fine, thought they were warm, thought the worst had passed. The certainty came first, and the dying came after. And there's a piece of this you can use even if you never set foot in the deep woods, Because the real lesson is bigger than freezing. It's that the feeling of being fine is not the same as being fine. Your body will lie to you. It will hand you comfort at the exact moment you're in the most danger. And it will hand you that comfort precisely because you're in danger. Because that's what a failing system does. It stops sounding the alarm. So the trapper's rule, the one that keeps a man alive, is that you don't trust the feeling. You trust the rule you set while your head was clear. You decide, warm and safe and thinking straight, what you'll do when the cold comes. And then when the cold comes and starts whispering that you feel fine and ought to lie down, you don't argue with it. You don't reason with it, because it's already stolen the part of you that reasons. You just follow the rule you set before the cold could reach it. So here's the whole of it, small enough to carry and free as the snow. Don't trust the warmth. When the cold suddenly feels easy, feels good, that's the alarm, not the all clear. Feed the shivering and keep the fat on you. The grease everyone throws away, because that's what your inner fire burns fastest. Break the wind before you do anything else, and let the snow itself shelter you. And in the worst of it, slow down, never sweat. Keep the fire low and steady, rather than flaring it up into the wet that kills you. Do that much, and set your rules while your mind is clear, and the cold can whisper all its sweet lies to you, and you'll still walk back through your own door instead of dying 40 feet short of it. Because that's the thing that haunts trappers about that story, and it's the thing I want you to carry out of here. The man didn't die because the country was cruel. The country was only ever just the country. He died because the cold reached his judgment before it reached his heart. And by the time his body gave out, the part of him that could have saved himself had been gone for hours. He was certain he was fine. And the wilderness never kills the humble man half as fast as it kills the sure one. And the old hands feared their own certainty more than they ever feared the cold itself. So tell me, down in the comments, and I mean this, I want to hear it. What's the one rule about the cold your parents or your grandparents drilled into you? The one that made no sense to you as a child, but that you follow to this day without knowing where it came from? Because I'd bet some of those rules are this exact knowing, worn smooth by time until nobody remembers the buried friend behind it. Next time, I'm going to hand you another one that turns everything you've been told clean on its head. Another old rule from this same hard country. It's about fire, of all things, and it goes against everything common sense will tell you. Because the bigger and hotter and brighter you build your fire out in the deep cold, the faster it can leave you to freeze. And I'll show you exactly why, and what the old hands built instead. Until then, take care of your fire, and don't ever let the cold tell you you're warm. Because the moment freezing feels like comfort is the moment you're closest to never feeling anything again.